It is now nearly September, and as of today, the WGA strike remains unresolved. So I decided to go ahead and dust off some archived videos and take a look at the very first franchise review I ever did, the original 13 movies of the Puppetmaster franchise, covering all the way from the first movie to Puppetmaster: The Littlest Reich. And this was back when I was doing a video review every day, so this was 13 consecutive days of Puppetmaster. So I decided to pull them all down, compile them into one big ultimate franchise review, and re-release. So please enjoy this slice of history that was recorded nearly 5 years ago right here on Rotted Reviews. Let's get to it.
We open on a familiar scene. Our favorite daily horror movie reviewers scrolling through options, deciding which movie to watch and review next. "Well, there's an interesting one," he proclaims. "It's a new Puppetmaster movie with Thomas Lennon." And so it was, released ever so recently. But wait, the reviewer realized he had a big problem. He had never seen a Puppetmaster movie before, and how could he review a movie without having seen and reviewed all the movies leading up to it first? Can he really wait the several months it would take to pepper probably 3 or 4 movies into his channel's rotation? Well, why not just rip off the Band-Aid and do them all, one right after another? Then I can get to the new one quickly. An excellent idea that roused his spirit, so taking his computer by the hand, the reviewer headed off toward the land of the Puppetmaster franchise. How many could there be? How bad could they be? Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today, as you might have guessed from the intro, I am tackling the Puppetmaster franchise, specifically the first movie made in 1989, and how I described it in that story was actually pretty accurate. I was having some dilemmas with, I really want to watch this new movie with Thomas Lennon. I really do. I love the idea of a comedic actor in a serious role. I know Puppetmaster is tongue-in-cheek, but even so, it's a horror movie. I'm assuming it's partly serious. And for me, that I just really love that element, and I love Thomas Lennon in general. So I really wanted to watch this, but how do I properly watch it for a Rotted review and know what I'm talking about, having never seen a Puppetmaster movie? Can I accurately portray the information that is necessary? Can I actually watch it and be objective and have that knowledge base? And then if I can't, if I need to lay that groundwork, so many movies, so many. And if I get to them, say, once every month, then it's going to take me a year to get to the one I want to watch. So that's the dilemma I found myself in, and that's the conclusion I came to, is ultimately just pull off the Band-Aid, tackle the franchise, don't stop until it's done. And I'm actually probably going to be turning that into a fairly regular segment. I think maybe once a season. I think once a month is a little too much, considering some of these do have 13, 15 movies in them. But maybe once a season, once every 6 months or so, I will be tackling a franchise and just knocking it out until it's done. And that way, if a new movie does show up for, say, Friday the 13th or Nightmare or whatever, I can just move forward with it and get these out of the way. So, this is my first Puppetmaster experience, and I honestly enjoyed it. I really did. It was not terrible. Usually the first of these movies aren't. Usually they kind of lay the groundwork in at least a believable and enjoyable fashion, and I thought this one did. The only real exception to that I can think of is Leprechaun. I didn't like a single Leprechaun movie, including the first one, but this one was actually pretty good. The Puppetmaster was not bad. It was a lot of fun. The premise I thought was fairly interesting, which kind of leads us into our categories. So let's go ahead and throw them up there. 4 different categories, as always, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And getting into the plot, the thing I really liked about this plot is that it took the idea of a slasher up against some teenagers, and it just crumpled them up and threw them out the window. It had nothing to do with anything that is your standard low-budget horror 80s movie. It started out in the 1930s with the Puppetmaster, a gentle old man with these nice puppets that just happened to be self-mobile. being hunted down by Nazis in a California hotel. And before they get to his room, he manages to hide them in a cubby. And the movie then fast forwards to the 1980s, where they are found, and the movie progresses from there using a series of characters that are basically psychics and are kind of called to the hotel through a binding psychic message. It's time, kind of thing. So I thought that was a really interesting place for it to go. I thought that the villain was good. There's an element in play here of the puppets not being inherently evil on their own, which I actually liked. They're basically serving at the behest of whomever happens to be controlling them, and even so, they're seemingly capable of independent thought and morality. And they have, I guess, what you could consider a soul, and though they have no moral ambiguity about going out and performing certain deeds, they also, at the same time, don't like being lied to or used. And I thought that was just kind of an interesting take on everything. I really liked it. And the cheese factor was pretty darn high with this. And, when you go into a movie like this, you have a certain level of expectation with it. Cheese is one of them. Fun is another. Gore, body count, all that is all on the table as far as expectations go. And I think that this met most of them. But Lawrence of Arabia, it was not. I gave the plot 12 out of 25 points. The intent, again, this is intending to be, in my estimation, a scary movie that has a high body count, a high blood, gore, creativity kind of count there, pushes the envelope with what a horror movie can do, and also have some elements of fun and TNA thrown in there. And I thought that it actually mostly succeeded with that. But first of all, for a movie about killer puppets, there were hardly any killer puppets in it. That is a little bit inexcusable for me. I know that it was low budget, but even so, you had maybe, I'd say, a grand total of 5-6 minutes of screen time with them, and it just felt lackluster. I mean, you definitely kind of crescendo towards the end, which was nice, but a lot of the movie had me wondering, well, where are they? Where are the killer puppets? This is a movie about killer puppets. And also the body count and the gore and so forth was just not quite up to where I thought it should be. And I'm hoping that all elevates in future releases. We will see. I gave the intent 9 out of 25 points. For a scary movie, it just wasn't. For a movie about killer puppets, I wanted to see more killer puppets. For a movie with blood and body count, there was surprisingly little. The acting, what can you say? This is an 80s horror movie. It's schlocky, it's cheesy, and the acting represents that. The dialogue is very, very, and it's delivered in, I guess, the best that they could, but even so, I gave the acting 11 out of 25 points. These kind of movies is where that category typically falls down. And, again, we'll have to see if that improves. Overall, I thought the characters are actually not too bad. They were at least engaging. So take that for what you will. And the technical is where this movie really kind of sets the bar a little bit higher. First of all, it used a first-person camera perspective, would put the camera 9 inches off the ground and showed the puppets running around from their point of view. And I actually thought that was pretty clever. It worked pretty well. It was perhaps a bit overused by the time the movie finished, but I did actually like it. Second of all, the stop motion that was used in this movie, I thought was really impressive. And I don't mean for the budget, and I don't mean for the time, and I don't mean for an 80s movie. I just mean it was impressive, genuinely, right across the board. I thought that it was really good. When they had to use it, they used it well. And the last bit of the technical that I want to address is the actual creature design. I am in love with these puppets. They are cute as a button, and they're just whimsical and fun and wonderful, and I really do love them. So high marks all around on that. I gave the technical a 17 out of 25 points. I was genuinely impressed by that portion. So that gives us a total of 49 out of 100 points. And that's pretty much all I really want to cover on the spoiler-free review. And I'm going to want to get into a lot more details on the spoiler-filled deep dive discussion video that will accompany this one. Other than that, tomorrow I will see you for Puppetmaster 2. And for the next 2 weeks, I'll see you for Puppetmaster movies. And next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. My dearest Annabelle, it is the second day of this battle and there's no end in sight. The people keep coming and the puppets keep killing them. I know I will have to endure this for the many weeks to come. It is only the light of your heart that provides me the fortitude to continue. Tonight, I march into the second movie. I have plenty of pemmican and hardtack, but I fear it will not be enough. I can only hope to endure. Pray for me, Annabelle. Pray for us all. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today is day 2 of 13 of the Puppetmaster franchise, which means today I review the 1990 movie Puppetmaster 2. Now, having watched this one, I gotta say, it feels like the sophomore syndrome is in full effect here. I really didn't like it as much as the first, even though it had points to it that I liked better than the first. Overall, taking the entire thing, it felt like it fell flat. So I'm going to go into why, I'm going to go into how, and the way we're going to do that is to go into the categories. Each one is worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. Now, the plot of this one was the general idea that at the very beginning, the puppets bring their puppet master that died back in the 40s back to life, Toulon, and Toulon is not in the greatest of shape. He is basically a walking around rotted corpse, but he wants to take on a more human palatable form, and the house becomes infested with FBI agents that are there to investigate paranormal and so on activity, and he uses that opportunity to put on bandages and goggles and full Claude Rains it up and use the puppets to in a nefarious scheme. And I think there was one major element of this movie that really blew. It really drug it down, and that was the monologuing. So many scenes of Toulon up in his attic with the puppets, and he's going on and on about his grand plan, and we're going to be happy again. It just kept happening. It just kept dragging on, and it was just painful. Set your puppets loose, have them kill people already. Let's have some fun with this. We get what the plot is. You don't need to continue the exposition. That was pretty much the biggest thing that drug it down for me. And I mean, everything else about it was kind of meh. Not a whole lot about this movie really worked for me, except the puppets and the kills. And when you're dealing with a Puppetmaster movie, what else do you want? Well, as it turns out, you kind of want something halfway decent in between. I gave the plot 8 out of 25 points, and the reason it got as high as 8 was because of the puppets and the kills. The intent obviously was to capitalize on a popular movie. I'm sure Full Moon Entertainment put the first Puppetmaster movie out, and it garnered a unexpected level of support. And, now it's, well, we got to strike while this financial iron is hot. And apparently they just never stopped doing that. But it was, the intention of having puppets run around, causing mayhem, causing death, ultimately I thought was a big success. They brought in a new puppet of Torch, which was awesome. They had more kills than the first one. It was bloodier than the first one, which is, in my review of the first one, exactly what I asked for. So I really can't complain there. As far as having the diabolical villain and the overall arcing plot line and storyline and trying to, deliver that with a punch, it really fell down on that one. So overall, balancing everything out, I gave The Intention 14 out of 25 points. The acting was eye-rollingly, laughable, bad, all around. Every single person in this, I'm pretty sure, was paid about $30 and a gift card to Burger King. That was about the performance that they were delivering. It was shockingly bad. There were characters in this that I really liked. That doesn't mean that the acting was good. I love that they actually put a harbinger in this movie. I love when a harbinger comes up and they're stereotypical, y'all don't go into that house. It's ruled with Satan. I love those moments. I really do. And this movie did have it. So, kudos to that. That doesn't mean it's good acting. It just means I like the character. The acting, I gave 5 out of 25 points. Technically, there were people standing in front of the camera and they did read lines. Participation ribbon. The technical, it felt like to me the camera work, it didn't get worse, it just got lazier. The whole thing with the first person camera mode in the first one that I actually kind of thought was endearing and charming, it didn't have quite as much of that this time. It felt a little bit lazier, and it just overall felt like this one was being made not to tell a story, but to push as much money coming in as our keep the budget low, keep the income high. We have this lightning in a bottle, as it turns out, and we're going to continue trying to bottle it. That's what it felt like, and every bit of the technical portion of it felt along those lines, except for the puppets themselves, which were still really phenomenal. The Torch character was great. Every puppet in this was great, and that's in a combination of, I'm sure, actual puppetry, stop motion effects. However they did that well. So overall, I gave the technical a 12 out of 25 points. So that gives us a total score of 39 out of 100 points. And that's pretty much kind of just how I feel about this movie. It was okay. It certainly wasn't good. It wasn't great. And it wasn't nearly as good as the first one. I'm hoping that it is just the sophomore effect and that it does continue on from there. Well, I hope for two things. One, obviously, that it gets better. And two, more specifically, I really hope that if Toulon comes back as a character, that he is a lot less of a jerk. I really liked that in the first one, at the beginning, he was this sweet, old, charming man who just loved his puppets, and just wanted to exist peacefully with them, and run away from the Nazis. And this felt like a very strong counter to that. It felt it didn't feel like the Toulon that I saw in the first one, and it threw me. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way he was portrayed. I didn't like the way he presented himself, the way he spoke, anything about the character in the second one I didn't like, and that for me was probably the most disappointing part, because I did, even though he was on screen for only a few minutes, I really did like him in the first one, and I want to like him again. So if he does come back, I really hope that I get that opportunity. So that should about cover it for this review of Puppetmaster 2. I welcome you to watch the Rotted deep dive that will accompany this video, and I'm going to go into that sophomore effect and why some sequels work and some don't, specifically the second movie in a long franchise, and one key element that I believe makes them work better. So I'll be discussing that. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow for Puppetmaster 3. And next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. Dearest Annabelle, The third day of the Puppetmaster journey is coming to a close. There was more bloodshed, more puppets, which was expected. We also found ourselves in the year 1939, which was decidedly unexpected. At this moment now, nobody can even conjure a guess as to where we might end up tomorrow. You're in my thoughts, Annabelle. Stay away from puppets. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am reviewing the third entry in the Puppetmaster franchise, Puppetmaster 3, made in 1991. And I thought that this was actually a marked improvement over the last one. I wasn't a huge fan of number 2. If you watched that review, I thought that the Toulon character, the way that they handled him was kind of rough feeling in terms of how he was presented in the first one. And it was way too much monologuing. It just drug out. And this one fixed a lot of that. First of all, the Toulon character is back to his, lovable character roots, and you want to root for him. He's not an antagonist, and he is just simply a guy trying to make his way and following the path that is kind of created for him. This movie is set in 1939 in Berlin, and he plays a Jewish puppeteer, and obviously he runs afoul of the Nazis, and the movie takes off from there. If I had any major complaints with this one, it would be that in terms of a movie versus real life, this is a situation where the evil of real life was way, way, way more evil. Nazis were obviously in this movie, and they were depicted as bad guys, but if it were a realistic movie, then this movie would probably be about 4 minutes long, including 3 minutes of opening titles. Just saying. But they needed to get the character on his journey. They needed to be able to give us an hour and a half long movie, and they did. So in order to do that, I think they had to dial back some of the realism as far as what Nazis would have done if they encountered the Toulon character. So let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot, I thought, was well written. It was fairly decent. The characters were interesting. The dialogue wasn't bad. The setting and sequence progression was good. And overall, just the story was fairly compelling. It wasn't cinematic excellence, but it was enjoyable. It was I was able to follow it. It didn't seem disjointed, and I gave the plot 14 out of 25 points. Overall, pretty good. Definitely not bad. The intent I gave actually a little bit more, and I gave it 16 out of 25 points. This movie is one of the great reasons of why I made the intent category. The movie's no longer trying to be scary. This follows a lot of the same ebbs and flows and paths that a lot of franchises do, and when they get to about the third movie, you kind of get some predictability in terms of quality of writing, how much budget they're willing to throw at it, and what they are trying to capture from the first two to satisfy audiences that are already wanting to be in the theaters watching the next blah movie. And this one, if the first one was trying to be scary and the second one was maybe trying to recapture that, this one threw it out the window, and it simply said, let's have some fun, let's have some puppets with knives. And I love that. I honestly do. This was a fun movie. This did have puppets with knives. It did have that sense of tongue-in-cheek jovialness as you watch bad guys do what they do, and then they get their comeuppance. And overall, it was just fun. So I gave 16 out of 25 for the intent. I thought it was really, really decent, and what it set out to do, it achieved. Not everything needs to be Ben-Hur or Lawrence of Arabia. Sometimes you just want a killer puppet movie, and this one gave it to us. The acting was definitely not great. It wasn't terrible. There wasn't anything in there that made me think, oh, geez, why did they do that? It really wasn't terrible. It just wasn't great. The without giving a whole lot of spoilers, I really don't consider this to be too much of a spoiler, but the character of Blade, the puppet Blade, this is his origin story and kind of the genesis of him. It's not centered around that. It just is an element of this movie. And it becomes very apparent at the very beginning of the movie, towards the beginning of the movie, as you start to encounter the Nazis and the bad guys and so forth, that one of them is, his facial features and the way he dresses and so forth. You could tell that this is the person that Blade is going to be modeled after. And that character, I thought, was actually really good. As far as the acting goes, I thought that he did a very decent job. A little bit one-dimensional, but I don't think that was the fault of the acting. I think that was more the character development in the actual script. So, acting 8 out of 25. It definitely was not terrible. It had some painful moments, but so be it. Now, the technical, I think, is the portion which stands out the most in this movie, and I gave it 17 out of 25 points. It has some of the best kills of the series that has happened so far. I mean, I know we're only in the third one in, we have 13 total, but so far, without giving spoilers, the last major kill it's not just great, it's iconic. When it started, and it is kind of it takes its time with this one, and when it started, I was thinking, well, this is gruesome, this is interesting, and then once I saw where they were going with it, I thought, this is now iconic. This is like, if I think of the Puppetmaster franchise and somebody asked me to name, just 5 scenes from all 13 movies, I guarantee that this is going to be one of them. I loved it. The puppetry, as always, was, pretty darn good. I thought that the stop motion was good. They definitely had a lot more of the puppets in this one, which is something that I've been asking for, and they delivered. They included a new one, 6-shooter, who's absolutely adorable. I love him to pieces. And, the puppets are just really front and center, and there's nothing about them that made me groan on a technical level, anything like that. I thought it was actually really well done. So 17 out of 25 points for the technical. Pretty good. And I have to say, honestly, the setting, and I mean, it didn't feel necessarily like we were in the heart of Berlin in 1939. I wasn't transported there. But even so, they had vintage cars. They had nice, it looked like European settings and facades. I was actually kind of almost thinking that it was France and the occupation, but it was supposed to be Berlin. Regardless, they did this movie for $800,000. They did it for less than $1 million, and they did a period piece. I thought that was impressive, and for them to be able to technically pull that off was very impressive to me. So, yeah, I have no qualms about giving this 17 out of 25 points. So that gives us a total of 55 out of 100 points. Overall, my absolute hands-down favorite of the series so far. I hope this quality of, this trending quality of it continues, and we see better and better as it goes on. I kind of doubt it, but I'm excited to find out. So that should about do it for this one. I'm going to have a deep dive, spoiler filled, where I'm going to discuss some elements of this movie in more detail. Other than that, I really appreciate you joining me. And next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. My dearest Annabelle. What's up, girl? The 4th day of fighting is closed and spirits are high. Today's battle was a dawdle, and hope remains that the remainder of the movies are as enjoyable. Annabelle, I beg of you. I know my absence left a void, but I must ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. 9 more days till I get to see you again. Take heart, and don't forget the cat gets his meds on Thursdays. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I'm looking at the 4th installment in the Puppetmaster franchise, Puppetmaster 4, made in 1993. And my thoughts on this one so far, having watched it, is that it is my absolute favorite of the series. It was just a lot of fun. It had plenty of puppet kills and was overall, it was just an enjoyable experience. It was the kind of fun that I look for in a movie like this. So to discuss it further, let's go ahead and go into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the first category, as always, is plot. And the plot, I gave 15 out of 25 points, which is very respectable for a movie such as this. The basic idea of it was takes place in the same old hotel that previous movies have done. And instead of guests staying at the hotel, it's actually being used by a scientist who is working on the next iteration of AI, computerized AI, and which has an interesting kind of correlation with the idea of the puppets, just in the terms of man creating life kind of thing. But in his attempt to create it, he stumbles across the dolls. He has friends come over, and they just generally interact. And this has an element of the evil behind the serum that gives life to the puppets and the physical manifestations of those as it tries to regain that power from the humans. I don't want to go too much further into it because that's going to get into spoiler territory. Suffice it to say, I thought it was actually really done well. It was a little confusing at first. When you saw the physical manifestation, the other world and so forth, and you weren't quite sure exactly what was going on there, but things did gel and they just became fun. So overall, 15 out of 25 for the plot. The intent, again, like the last one, any concept of having a scary horror movie is out the window at this point. They are simply trying for fun, puppets killing things movie. And, that's not an excuse to have a bad movie with those elements, but even so, they actually pulled out a good movie with that. So overall, I gave the intent 17 out of 25. It continued fleshing out the nature of the puppet characters and, individual ones as well. And I mean, I know I've said this before, but the best word I can describe this one is fun. It just genuinely was a thrill ride and just super fun. So the acting, I gave a 13 out of 25. The actors stepped it up in terms of the Puppetmaster franchise, and they actually delivered fairly solid performances. There was the protagonist, the main character, and he did a very good job of kind of being the interesting, quirky, clean cut, but kind of embracing the idea of the puppets coming alive and generally not being totally freaked out by it, but actually finding that element of the parallel between what's happening there and his work. So really like that. He also had a character that was playing the jerk, and if you're going to put a character like that in your movie, you really need to not, I mean, I say this about a lot of elements of horror, but this is one element you really can't hold back. And this movie did a great job of it. He wasn't an evil person. He wasn't a villain. He was simply a jerk. He was the kind of person that was set up so that you hope they die, and in glorious fashion. And he did it really well. And it was just well acted on all counts. So 13 out of 25 for there. I mean, obviously, you're not going to get Anthony Hopkins level performance out of a Puppetmaster movie, but when you sit down and you watch these movies, you kind of have an expectation, and I think this rose above them. So overall, pretty darn good. And the technical, I gave a 17 out of 25. Again, this kind of continues on because one aspect of the Puppetmaster franchise that has done well overall throughout the entirety has been the technical. The stop motion is really good. The props are really good. The camera movement is good. The puppetry effects overall, how they all just kind of blended together with the stop motion, and I'm sure a lot of other effects that they used there, forced perspective and so forth. It just worked well, and ultimately it gave itself to be a fun movie. All the technical things, all the acting things, it all combined together to make something that was just an enjoyable, mindless, watching puppets kill things movie. So that should about do it for Puppetmaster 4. I look for you tomorrow for Puppetmaster 5. Hopefully it will be as good or better, possibly. Fingers crossed. Other than that, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. My sweet Annabelle, it is with a heavy heart that I must inform you that the high spirits of yesterday's correspondence have been crushed. The battle today was brutal and painful. I now have 8 more days to endure, and I fear I lack the fortitude to do so. Keep me in your thoughts, Annabelle. P.S. Did you give the cat his meds? Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I'm taking a look at the 1994 classic Puppetmaster 5. Now, I was afraid this would happen. The first movie was kind of, Second movie was kind of, Third, and fourth, This one, it was my absolute least favorite in the series so far. And it's an interesting thing because it picks up the same exact story and characters as Puppetmaster 4, which I really, really liked. It basically takes place directly after those events. And this had many mistakes, but I think it made the biggest cinematic mistake that is possible. And I will go over that in just a little bit. But for right now, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. Now, the first category, as always, is plot. And the plot on this one, it like I said, it picked up where the last one left off. And somehow we're at a police station where the main character is being kept. And I guess that makes sense. If bodies were found, police have to get involved, and police are going to start questioning, and they're not going to believe that, we little puppet demons were running around. So, obviously somebody's got to be held accountable, and, who else is there at this point? So, yeah, they have the main character in custody, and, lack of evidence and so forth. The story basically just kind of goes on from there. But here's the problem with it, and this is probably going to be a little bit of a spoiler, but honestly, I don't think it's really that. I think it's necessary for me to say it, that the entirety of the movie is something that could have been compressed down to 1, maybe 2 scenes, not just acts, but scenes. And ultimately, it led us right back where we left off in Puppetmaster 4. So, considering that it drew things out for so much and had so little activity, and ultimately brought us back to the same place we were at before we even watched this movie, the biggest word I can describe Puppetmaster 5 is pointless. It was absolutely pointless. It developed nothing with the characters, developed nothing with the puppets, it developed nothing with the storyline. And I was just really wondering why in the heck I was watching it. I would say about 2/3 of the way through the movie, I paused it just to look at the timestamp and to reflect on what I had been watching. And it really dawned on me that pretty much the entirety of what I had been watching was him being released from the police station, him going back to the hotel, and him finding the puppets. They've been scattered around the hotel and him finding them. That's it. At the 2/3 mark, that is it. And it doesn't get a whole lot better after that. It's just, and sorry, I know this is spoilery, but honestly, I think this is almost like a public service that I'm doing here. I'm going to be discussing a lot more individual scenes and a lot more specifics in the, you know what? I'm going to do something here that I've been considering doing for a little while, and I'm not going to have a deep dive discussion on this one, and here's why. I feel like if there's nothing to really contribute to a deep dive discussion, if there's not spoilery elements or or even thematic elements that need further investigation and discussion and so forth, then I feel like I'm kind of just spinning my wheels and ultimately coming up with vocal filler. And that's something I really don't want to do. I want every video on here to have some meat to it. So if it doesn't deserve it, it's not going to get it. If it's not tackling some thematic issues, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that a bad movie is not going to get a deep dive review. Bad movies certainly could. It's more if there's nothing specific in the movie that I feel like really warrants discussion, and if it's not tackling any thematic issues as far as plot structure, or how I might have done things differently, or if the character tropes, stuff outside of the movie itself, but things that it may have addressed or brought up that I feel is worthy of discussion. If it doesn't have any of that, I'm not going to bother. It really feels like a waste of your time. And that's going to be the case on this one. So, all the spoilery elements, I guess, is kind of coming out to the light here. But it's not terrible spoilers, because it's not really it's not a movie worthy of not being spoiled. I'm simply describing the plot, and the plot ultimately just winds up in a place that doesn't matter, because as it ends, and I'm not going to go over the climactic ending or anything like that, but the very ending, it basically has the main character being given the mantle of Puppetmaster, and please take care of them. They are in your charge and so forth. But that's exactly where 4 left off. So where are we now? We're nowhere. Okay, so scoring. Sorry, I kind of got off the rails there. But scoring, I gave a 5 out of 25 for the plot. Technically, what was there was fairly coherent. It was followable. And, it did move at a snail's pace, but it did move. It ultimately led us somewhere. So 5 out of 25. I mean, it's pretty much at that point a congratulations, you put pen to paper kind of thing. The intent, I also gave a 5 out of 25. It did have puppet kills. But other than that, it wasn't scary. It wasn't fun. It wasn't interesting. And like I said earlier, it didn't explore anything new. It didn't even really explore a whole lot of the old. It didn't do a whole lot. It was just kind of an hour and a half of wasted celluloid. The acting, I gave an 8 out of 25. It was worse than the last movie, but the characters that did make it from the 4 to 5, I thought did about the same job. And I'm not going to say they did a great job. The acting that did hold up pretty well in 4 did translate over to 5. But the new characters that were brought in were pretty bad. So 8 out of 25 there. And the technical, I kind of dipped down from where I had been doing previously. I gave it a 5 out of 25. The puppeteering was good. The stop motion was good. But there was absolutely nothing new brought to the table. And overall, everything else about the movie kind of really did suffer a bit. The camera work wasn't nearly as interesting. The setting wasn't nearly as interesting. As we were traveling around the house, the lack of any kind of fluidity to it really was kind of apparent. And, ultimately, when you have such timing missteps and you ruin the beat of the movie by dragging it so long, I feel like that's a technical error as well. That's an editing thing that might have been able to be at least fixed up somehow. So 5 out of 25 for the technical. And that gives us a total score of 23 out of 100. Not great. Definitely not my favorite of the series, certainly. I really hope it picks up. I really hope that, when 4 ended, I was saying, well, I really want this storyline to continue. And now that it has, I'm like, well, okay, I kind of want it to end now. This is a point that I knew I would get at with the Puppetmaster series. And it's a point that I get at with most franchises, is once we get to 4, 5, 6 or so, it starts to become an endurance trial. And there's a sense of, you're not going to get a quality movie out of, going further into a franchise like this. It's so rare. And I'm struggling. I can't even think of any specific instances until we start to get to like, reboots and rehashes. But once we're just like, continuing on and adding numbers to the title, it's really tough to get a good movie out of here. But a lot of them still at least keep the spirit and keep the level of fun going. And I think one of the worst things that a franchise can do is stop that. And I think that this movie is a misstep, and it's heading towards the wrong direction as far as keeping a fun franchise going. I'm hoping it rights the ship, and we shall see. But the biggest sin that this committed is the biggest sin you can do in all of cinema. You can have a bad movie, you can have a slow movie, but the only thing that you cannot ever, ever, ever have is a boring movie. And this was. So that's my thoughts on it. Here's looking towards tomorrow. We'll see how that turns out. And other than that, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. Annabelle, as you know, I am no stranger to the act of blasting through a horror franchise. I have watched and always endured. Even when that leprechaun fella went to space. But this may be the truest test of my resolve yet. P.S. Look, I ain't kidding about those meds for the cat. It's a kidney thing, you don't mess with the kidneys. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am reviewing the 6th movie in the Puppetmaster series, Curse of the Puppetmaster. That's right, the numerical order is now out the window. So this one was made in 1998, a full 4 years after the previous one, and it ditches the storyline of where that left off. 4 and 5, 4 started with its own storyline, 5 continued with that, and 6 has developed into something entirely on its own. Still has to do with the puppets and the same puppet characters, but the humans around them and the storyline and circumstances are totally different at this point. So, brass tacks, where do I think this lands in the quality department? I would say that it is better than the last one, which isn't saying a whole lot, but it is still not great. It is, I'd say it's probably my second least favorite in the franchise so far. And there's a few reasons for that. And to get into those reasons, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot, as far as this one goes, has to do with a small town puppeteer that needs to hire on some extra help. So he finds this slow-witted, I suppose, mechanic that happens to be good with wood carving that he finds out through the happenstance of Whitland. And he takes him on and introduces him to the puppets that are part of his puppet theater, which are the puppets that we know and love, Blade, Six Shooter, all that. And he enlists the help of this mechanic, to be a puppet wood carver, and to follow a template that he has found that would enable him to, do something. It's assumed that he's trying to create another of these puppets that he happened to find. Overall, I thought that was a fairly interesting premise. It just wasn't executed very well. The dialogue was pretty bad, and the writing as it goes, it had a lot of pacing issues, and it didn't really know exactly when to stop one scene or to draw a scene out that it needed to. Overall, as far as the plot goes, I gave it a 7 out of 25. The intent... I think that genuinely the intent of this one was supposed to be that it was trying for a, starting over, not a reboot, but just kind of starting fresh, putting the old, aside and, bringing in the new of a storyline and still having the same fun, energetic and pleasing to the fans of the franchise kind of movie. And I thought that in all of that, it failed pretty spectacularly. It wasn't fun. Just like it's pretty much like the last one in this regard. It wasn't fun. It wasn't interesting. It was boring. It moved better than 5, but only in timing. Aesthetically, actually, I thought it was even worse. But I'll get into that with the technical. There wasn't nearly enough in the realm of puppets or kills. And to be perfectly honest, after having watched it, I was vague about what the Puppetmaster was hiring the guy to do. And the reason for that is because I'm still not sure. It really didn't exactly explain. I mean, it explained on a technical level what this person was accomplishing by, filling out this template and carving these pieces and putting them together. But it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of motivational theory. I just don't get why he was wanting that in the first place. It just. So yeah, the intent I gave a 5 out of 25. I could not go any higher than that. The acting, I get even lower on this. I gave it a 4 out of 25. It was just phenomenally terrible, and not even in a fun way. Sometimes you get the acting so bad it's good, and this one is just it was just bad. There was nothing. When you get that kind of so bad it's good acting level, then it can be fun, and it can be you can throw popcorn at the screen and you can have fun with your friends and just kind of put words in their mouth and basically do what Tom Servo over there does. But this just wasn't like that. It just wasn't endearing enough and schlocky enough. It was just poor acting mixed with the bad dialogue. It certainly didn't help any. So acting, I gave a 4 out of 25. And the technical, I am sorry, but I gave a 2 out of 25. And the reason for that is the puppeteering is one of the biggest saving graces of even the bad movies within this franchise. And in this one, it was really fairly minimal. They had no stop motion whatsoever in this. And most of the puppets that were on the screen, most of the footage, as far as I understand it from what I've been reading on IMDb, was from previous movies. So that seems like it's lazy. It's just honestly lazy. I know they only have so much of a budget to work with. As I think it was $400,000, which was like half of what the previous one was. But at the same time, that's not an excuse for putting out a bad movie. If you're going to have a movie with puppets that are part of a franchise that stop motion and quality technical skill and adeptness has been an integral part of the series, you need to continue on with that. Otherwise, just don't bother making it. If you can't afford it, don't, to bring it to that level, don't bother. It's just not worth it. And the camera work was really peculiar. It had very harsh angles, very top down, very bottom up, very, very harsh angles mixed with harsh, weird lighting. It made me think of a poor man's attempt at Dario Argento-esque exuberance with the camera work and color work, and it ultimately just kind of failed. The effect was pretty dismal. So 2 out of 25. That's my biggest complaint about this movie. I still enjoyed it more than the previous one, even though I think this definitely has a lower score of 18 out of 100 points. The previous one had 23, which is interesting because I did enjoy this one just a little bit more. Only insofar as the storyline progressed at a slightly better pace, and it proved to be not as boring as 5. And that's why when I mentioned that in 5, my review of 5, that the biggest sin you can make in a movie is to make it boring. You can have bad. In this one, 6, Curse of the Puppet Master, it was bad. But it wasn't quite as boring. So even though on a technical level, breaking it down and putting it into a scoring system of categories and tiling it up, it winds up being less, I actually enjoyed it more. That's not to say that I really enjoyed it. It was just more tolerable. So that's about all I really have to say. So there won't be a deep dive accompanying this one. There's really no parts of this that I really need to cover. The most interesting things there were the puppets, and those were from previous movies, so why bother? So I think that should about do it for this one. I think the next movie coming up is Retro Puppetmaster, which I will be covering tomorrow. I hope to see you there. Otherwise, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. Dearest Annabelle, well, it happened again. We went back in time. This time to ancient Egypt. Makes no sense, right? Nothing about the horrors I've seen makes sense. I'm over halfway through my trials now, and it's looking like the struggle is far from over. Keep me in your thoughts, Annabelle. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am looking at the 7th installment in the Puppetmaster series. That's right, we're halfway through. We're getting there. This one is Retro Puppetmaster, and like the title implies, and like I had anticipated earlier on in my review of Puppetmaster 3, I believe it was, in this title we have gone back in time again. And this time it starts out what I believe is to be ancient Egypt, but the bulk of the movie takes place in what I'm assuming to be the late 1800s in Paris, France. And it follows the young Toulon as he gets the information on the secret formula, magical element that is life and how to give it to the puppets. And in this time, Toulon is played by Greg Sestero, who you may recognize from The Room. So anticipate an interesting score in the acting category. Speaking of categories, let's get into them. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the first one being the plot. Now, this was not a great movie. This was not a great plot, but it was somewhat coherent. It was, I mean, in comparison to the last two, it actually felt like a movie. It actually felt like it had flow and a path that the characters were following. And, it made a logical amount of sense, even if character motivations and other elements of it didn't. So, and they didn't. The character motivations and the flow of it and the dialogue and everything else about it was pretty terrible. But I was at least able to follow along. It wasn't boring. It was confusing for elements that I'll get into shortly here, actually, probably with the intent. So I gave the plot a 7 out of 25. A little better than the previous ones. Still not great, which is about accurate for how I felt about this movie. The intent. Now, this one was really, really difficult for me as far as coming up with a score. And the reason for that is I'm trying to figure out what the intent of this movie was. It was very, very disappointing insofar as it was the first, and I'm not sure, I think maybe the only title in this franchise that is PG-13 and not R. I can't figure out what this movie was actually trying to be. That's about it. I can speak to what the intent should have been as a member of this franchise. I can speak to what elements it was missing, but what they intended this movie to be, I couldn't tell you. For a killer doll movie, or killer puppet movie, to be more accurate, we can't defend the puppets. There was no gore. I don't think there was a single drop of blood. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this, if you've seen it already, but I don't think there was a single solitary drop of red food coloring used in this movie. For a horror movie, it made no sense. And, I could not figure out what the intent was supposed to have been. So then judging it by how successful or how much it failed at that attempt, how can I do that? It wasn't terribly fun. I just can't figure out what they were intending with this one. So the best I can really do is try to figure out what the intent should have been in the context of the entire franchise. And the entire franchise is made up of killer puppets. It's a horror franchise that is supposed to be fun and interesting and schlocky and take advantage of the direct-to-VHS market that was emerging in the 80s and 90s and just capitalize on it with as low of a budget as possible and show the people a good time with some fun and some blood and some gore and some good kills and some puppetry and just overall treat the audience to the franchise that has been grown already. And in that, I felt like it missed the mark for obvious reasons. You had puppets that didn't really kill, not really. I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. So I gave The Intent 6 out of 25. I felt like there was so many missed opportunities here. It should have been R rating. It should have just not held back. It should have just gone for the gore, gone for the fun. I mean, it's not like they were trying to, make the most compelling storyline out there. They should have, known what their priorities were, zeroed in on them, and went for it. And I mean, that's what I have the Intent category for, is for the movies that do that, for the movies that are bad dialogue, for the movies that are badly acted, but they know what they're supposed to be, and they do it fully. And I love that. That's one of the best things and why horror movies get such a bad rap in the normal world of critical review, and why they won't here, is because I do love those, and they are going to get up to 25 points in the Intent category at the very least. I can't do it for this one. So take that for what you will. The acting, it's Greg Sestero. What do you want? I have nothing against the guy, but for this movie, and I know this was really early on in his acting career, this was before The Room, but, judging fairly and objectively, he hit one note and pretty much stuck with that note throughout the entire thing. There was a range of emotions that the character could be going through, pride, loss, mourning, love, all sorts of stuff. And it was pretty much even keel right across the board, no matter what the character was experiencing. And he was the main character. Everybody else in there was kind of so-so. It was adequate, but overall, I gave the acting 6 out of 25. The technical, it got better in some areas. It got worse in others. And the stop motion was back. I have to give it some props for that. I think that's a critical element to these movies, and it's something that needs to be there. However, it wasn't great. It was pretty jittery. It was very low frames per second, as opposed, just looking at the first two movies, especially, the stop motion was wonderful. And I really can't say that about this one. I'm glad it's back, but I wish they had done a better job with it. The camera work was back to normal as far as, the last movie had the really harsh angles and the really harsh lighting and very odd perspectives. And fortunately, this toned that down. So I was happy about that. But here, one of my major issues with this one is the editing. The editing of this one was abysmal. There were several moments in there, and towards the climactic end especially, I really noticed this because I was laughing so hard at a scene where I really shouldn't have been. There was a showdown on the train. And not really giving a whole lot away here, but you had the protagonist and the antagonist, and they were kind of squaring off against each other, staring each other down. And you had a suspenseful music overlay going there, Yeah, it was just really suspenseful. And then the action started, and things were going on, and puppets were getting in there, and they were stabbing things with knives, and but the suspenseful music stayed right at that as if they were still squaring off. It never it never matched the level of energy that was actually happening on screen. I am pretty sure that whatever the editor had going on, it was with a blindfold and earmuffs. I could not figure it out, and it was hilarious watching that discrepancy happen. It took all the energy out of any action within the movie, and it completely tossed it in the trash can. So, and it ultimately made it laughable. And, I mentioned that, the puppets were stabbing things, but I also mentioned there wasn't a drop of blood. That's true. They were stabbing mummies and dust was flying out. And a lot of it, instead of feeling like really brutal, awesome kills, just felt like death by Snicker snack. I am going to be having a deep dive discussion because the last two I really didn't. It really didn't deserve it. And I'm not saying that this one does, but I think it's time to take a moment and actually have a discussion, get a bead on where we're at, and regroup. So as far as Retro Puppet Master goes, this review I gave 24 out of 100 points. And moving on to part 8 tomorrow. Other than that, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. My darling Annabelle, I grow gravely concerned by the lack of correspondence as of late. I pray that you are in good health and of a loyal heart. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am reviewing the 8th Puppetmaster movie in the franchise, Puppetmaster: The Legacy, made in 2003. And this is going to be a very short review because that's all this movie deserves. There will be no deep dive discussion about it. The categories, as always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the reason that this review is going to be super short is because of the plot. There was none. It was a compilation movie. Very disappointing. You know how when you watch your favorite sitcom and then around season 5 or 6 they wind up doing they all sit around a table and they remember when, and it fades into and it shows clips from previous episodes. That's all this movie was. You had a central core storyline that lasted all of about 2 combined minutes, and the rest of it was a rehash of everything that had happened up until that point with all the movies previous. It would show a solid 10 minutes of one movie, and then it would go back to the central core storyline. It's like, yeah, but you remember when? And then it would show 10 minutes of another movie, and it would... pointless. Absolutely pointless. Plot gets 0 points. Intent gets 20 points because I think that's what they were going for. Make it super cheap. They probably made this movie for about $5 and some Big Macs for the crew. And I think that's what the intent was. It was a quick cash grab for no budget and putting out another Puppet Master to continue the franchise and own the licensing rights and put it out on VHS in people's hands. And you know what? Total above board honesty, I appreciate that. I'm still not going to give it a full 25 points because I think that would be disingenuous, but I I appreciate the level of moxie involved there. So intent, I think that they succeeded wildly with what they intended. Whether or not that was noble is another discussion. So 20 out of 25 points there. Acting 2, technical 2, total 24. That's about it. I'll see you tomorrow. Next time you want to watch a horror movie, make sure that it's good and rotted. Cousin Ernie, I heard you were back from visiting the McGillicuddies in New York City. You were always a good friend to me, so I'll call upon you for a favor now. My Annabelle has gone strangely quiet on me, and in the trying time that is these Puppet Master trials, I feel the fate of my victory lies in the hands of the knowledge that she is safely at home waiting for me. Please check in on her and let me know she is well. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am reviewing the 9th entry in the Puppet Master series, Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys, made in 2004. Now, this movie is technically non-canonical, and I have some issues with that might be a bit controversial to Puppet Master fans. Primarily, I think the thing that might be... when I hear that something is non-canonical, that it has been excluded from the storyline, I think that can come from one of two places. It can either come from the actual technical issues regarding the storyline and the licensing and the fact that this may have been a one-off done by a different company, which is accurate, and I'll get into that. Or it could be that it was shunned by the fans, and I'm really not sure which one it is. If it was shunned by the fans, then this is going to be controversial because I actually really like this one. As far as the, different company, different storyline, basically what happened, as far as I understand it, is This was supposed to have been made after the second Puppetmaster movie. There was a Demonic Toys franchise that came out around that time, and it was clear that they wanted to bring them together. They were both owned by Full Moon Entertainment, and it just never lined up. They weren't ready with the storyline, the script, and so forth. And the third Puppetmaster movie script was in a more ready state, and they really needed to knock these out every year to get the VHS push rush out. And so that was put ahead to Puppetmaster 3 was put ahead of this one, and then it just never really lined up from there. It just kind of kept putting push back and in favor of other storylines. And the franchise had really stalled out around 1999. We did have Puppetmaster The Legacy in 2003, but that was just a flashback episode. And as you've seen in my review, what I thought of that. Now, at this point, it seems like Sci-Fi, the channel, was wanting to come up with their next entry in blank versus blank, and they happened upon this and thought, well, why don't we actually do this Puppetmaster versus Demonic Toys? So they worked with Full Moon, and they actually did it, and they consider it to be non-canonical. And my problem with having a movie excluded from the storyline like this is the one thing that the Puppetmaster series has not been is consistent. The elixir of life. In one movie, it's strictly a formula. In the next, it's a formula distilled using brain matter. In the next, it's simply magic and possibly an incantation. In the next, it's magic and an incantation and a ring that extracts some blood or fluid from the spinal cord of somebody. Just a drop will do. And it never really follows a strict set of rules and overarching storyline that is consistent. And in some of them, the souls have to be a willing participant of this, otherwise the elixir of life thing won't work. It just, if you're going to exclude a movie and you're going to say that this one is non-canonical because it doesn't match the storyline, you better have a solid storyline in your canon. That's all I'm saying. Your canon should be something that you are willing to hold up to scrutiny and protect. And so, I mean, as far as this one not being part of it, fine. Who am I to mess with history? So let's get into the actual review of the movie itself. Now, first of all, the one thing that I have been asking for and I haven't been receiving in Puppetmaster movies for a little while now is fun. The last several were boring. Either that or toned down to the point of PG-13, no blood, nothingness. And we're not even going to talk about The Legacy anymore. The notion of fun and puppet kills and blood is back. And granted, this was a Sci-Fi original. It was made for TV. It's not going to have the most gruesome, gory, bloody, splatterfest thing on the screen. That's not necessarily what I was asking for. I was asking for puppet kills and fun. And this really did bring it. I made a point of, before I watched this one, to step back and watch the first Demonic Toys movie, which I had never seen. And that one was bloody, gory fun. The character of Baby Oopsie Doopsie was really, that was a bit much for me as far as bad taste kind of thing. But regardless, it was back in this one. And obviously more toned down than what they did in the first Demonic Toys movie, because, again, Sci-Fi original made for TV. But they really did have... it wasn't just fun for me to watch. You can tell that it was fun for them to make. And it really showed. It really came through. And I really have to appreciate that. I can tell that while they were rolling the cameras, they were smiling as much as I wound up smiling watching the movie. And when you're talking about, killer puppets going up against demonic toys, if you're not going to have fun, what's the point? I mentioned that before, and I really maintain that. So kudos to this film for bringing it back. We'll see what the next 4 movies do here, but let's get into the categories. Each category worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. So the plot, I gave a 5 out of 25. It was pretty terrible as it was written on the page. It really wasn't that great. It followed the character of Robert Toulon and his daughter, Robert being the great-grandnephew of Andre Toulon, the Toulon that we've all known and loved throughout the series here. And he is attempting to recreate the family elixir and continue the family tradition of bringing these puppets to life. And in doing so, with his success, he is put in the crosshairs of a toy company and the evil woman who runs it, who is attempting a nefarious scheme of putting toys in the hands of all the children of the world before Christmas. And yes, this is a Christmas horror movie. I adore Christmas horror movies. And in doing so, putting the toys in the hands of all these children that Christmas morning, they would be inhabited by demonic entities all across the world, and it would cause panic and mayhem and death and destruction. And it was cheesy. It was purposefully cheesy. But the writing structure, I couldn't give a whole lot of leniency to. Every situation was set up in sole support of the next situation. And by that, okay, here's an example, is Robert had the puppets in the case and was with his daughter, and they were ready to head out and join the fray. It was beginning to be a climactic moment. They were strapped and ready to go. And but you can tell the writers were thinking, well, we need to get the puppets and his daughter alone. We need to get him out of the picture so that they can be kidnapped. How do we do that? Oh, I know. Robert stands there and is like, wait, before we go, I have to pee. Off he goes. So I mean, that's what I mean. Every situation is only in service of leading up to the next one. Pretty shoddy writing, but it's a sci-fi original. What do you want? So 5 out of 25 for that. The intent, I gave a 23 out of 25. This is exactly what they meant to do, and it's exactly what they delivered. They wanted to make a franchise versus franchise, cheesy, ham-acted, schlockfest, sci-fi original, and they did it. They did it without reservation or hesitation, and I love them for it. I thought they did a very, very, very good job with what they intended to do. This is a perfect example of why I have the intent category in my scoring of horror movies, is whether or not it's good, whether or not the intentions of it were noble, whether or not the acting was good, whether or not the plot structure was good. What they set out to do, they did with flying colors, and I am going to give them as many points as possible for that. So 23 out of 25. Almost perfect, not quite. The acting, it was cheesy but enjoyable. I mean, again, they had fun, and it really showed. I mean, Robert Toulon is played by Corey Feldman. That's right. You have a Puppetmaster versus Demonic Toys Christmas horror sci-fi original starring Corey Feldman. How much more fun can you get? So I mean, yeah, every scene was kind of chewed up and with a smile and a wink. Regardless, it really wasn't great. So 7 out of 25 for that. Cheesy but enjoyable. And the effects, they weren't terrible, but they weren't great. It was sci-fi original. It was pretty much exactly what you come to expect. It didn't have the Mega Python versus Lava Tarantula-esque CG badness, but the quality did show in the stop motion and the puppetry and so forth. It was very clear that most of them, as far as the demonic toys goes, were somebody's hands just up a rubber mask and blah, blah, blah. And the stop motion of the puppets was extraordinarily jittery. And the design of the puppets were a little bit off too, and I can't quite understand why they did that. If they had the cooperation of Full Moon Entertainment and they were using these franchises, even if they weren't allowed the usage of the original dolls and they had to recreate them, I don't know why they couldn't have been a little bit more faithful. That was probably my biggest issue with this, is as somebody that has loved the Puppetmaster movies and has fallen in love with the 6-shooter and Blade and Pinhead and so forth dolls, when you change the aesthetic of them and make them look a little bit more, bright, it was jarring as a fan. It was jarring. So that would be my big complaint, and I think that will be something that will ding the technical category as well. So 7 out of 25 for that, which brings us to a total score of 42 out of 100 points, the bulk of which being the intent, which I did love. So that should about do it for this review of Puppetmaster vs. Demonic Toys. Up next, tomorrow will be Puppetmaster Axis of Evil, which will apparently start the Axis trilogy. I don't know what that means. We're going to find out together. And in the meantime, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. Personal journal entry, September the 19th. It has been days since I have heard from Annabelle or anyone at home. The empty silence is compounded by the atrocities witnessed with the movies. Only 3 left to go now, but the brief glimmer I had seen so recently has once again been squashed. I fear my path will only go further into the darkness. I fear I will never return from where it will lead. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am reviewing Puppetmaster Axis of Evil, which is canonically Puppetmaster 9, made in 2010, and the start of the Axis trilogy. So my first thoughts on this one were aesthetically, the last one we just saw was very different, but it was also non-canonical. It was Puppetmaster vs. Demonic Toys, a sci-fi original with Corey Feldman, which was very bright and cheery. I mean, it was a Christmas horror movie that was tongue-in-cheek sci-fi kind of thing. And this one is a return to form in the dramatic, darker, character-driven aesthetic that the Puppetmaster series is more known for. And it's not that I didn't care for that. I actually was pretty on board with that. It's that everything else they did felt like a misstep. The previous movie had a sense of fun that I thought was missing from the franchise, and it seems to be missing again. The tongue-in-cheekness of it is not necessarily something that I require. You definitely get some tongue-in-cheek with the sci-fi originals. But it's not tongue-in-cheek, it's just a sense of overall fun that feels like it's missing. If it doesn't have tongue-in-cheek, if it's not self-aware and making fun of itself, that's fine. It doesn't need to, but I think it does need to be fun. And ultimately, it just wasn't. All the other issues I have with it, I think, are best covered within the categories. So let's go ahead and get into them. 4 different categories, as always, 25 points each for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot of this one, I gave an 8 out of 25. The story structure was fairly passable, but the character development and the dialogue was pretty darn weak. The nature of this is it goes back in time again. It actually takes us to the very start of things when Toulon took his life, and it doesn't at that point fast forward to any new plot line. It actually takes place right then and there with a young man witnessing the Nazis coming out of his room and apparently having been privy to the notion of the puppets and so forth. And he was a woodworker, so he knew where the puppets were hidden, and he took them and went back home to Los Angeles, and the movie kind of picks off from there. And it turns into kind of a Nazi versus Allies kind of, supposed to be a spy thriller, I suppose. Has to do with kind of foreign power espionage situations. And like I said, from a actual just plain Jane story kind of thing, it was okay. It was very passable. It worked okay. I could see where they were going with it, and it wasn't a bad idea. It just was executed pretty poorly. Which gets us into the intent. The intent, I gave a 5 out of 25. Ultimately, I think in movies past with Puppet Master, I think the thing I said that was the biggest sin you can do, and I believe this across any movie, and not just Puppet Master and not just horror, but any movie, the worst sin you can make is making a boring movie. You can make a bad movie, just don't make a boring movie. And in this case, it wasn't boring. It actually had beats in it that flowed pretty well. But the big word that I can really use for this one was uninteresting. The characters were uninteresting. What happened to them was uninteresting. The puppets themselves, unfortunately, for the first time that I think I can really recall within this entire series, were uninteresting. And that's a darn shame, because they are the bright spot about this entire franchise, no matter how dark it got. It was actually just fairly disappointing in that regard. It was supposed to be a character-driven, darker, return to the roots Puppet Master movie, and it just wasn't interesting. The kills weren't interesting. There was one that was okay, and that was Leech Woman's. And other than that, I wasn't bored. I was just tuned out by the time it was done. The acting, I gave a 6 out of 25. There was some really, really poor delivery within this movie, and the main characters did an okay-ish job. There was a whole lot of badly written dialogue, and so I don't put a whole lot of fault on them for it. But even so, it wasn't delivered in the best way. But the big bring down of this was one of the central antagonists of a Japanese woman who was working with the Nazis. I guess they call her Dragon Lady. And the acting of this performer was absolutely terrible. She spoke with the cadence of somebody that had forgotten their lines and continued to forget their lines and constantly had to be fed them or remember them midway through a sentence. It was almost like she didn't quite remember what next to say. It was very distracting. It was very disappointing, and it really brought the acting score down. So 6 out of 25 for that. The technical, the cinematography and the camera work, it was definitely more professional and film-like than we've gotten in some of the Puppet Master movies, and even certainly in the last one, Sci-Fi Original, What Are You Gonna Do? This definitely felt more like a return to a film feel to it. So the technical gets a few more points for that. However, what really brings it down, and the technical did get a 9 out of 25. It was the best of the categorical lot. But what did bring it down and prevent it from getting any higher whatsoever was, unfortunately, the puppets. Though I don't think there was any stop motion to be had. Most of it was simple physical manipulation of the puppets themselves, which I think was unfortunate and a misstep, because they were very static. And in films past, when a character like the Puppet Master or a Toulon or whoever was kind of their caretaker in that particular movie, whenever they would interact with that person, it was always fairly animated, fairly expressive. I mean, for characters that don't talk, they were very expressive. And in this one, they simply weren't. He would have them all lined up on a shelf and talking to them, and they would be stone still. And that's just unfortunate, because the worst thing that I can say is, if this had been the first Puppet Master movie, if this had been my first foray into watching a Puppet Master movie, I would not have fallen in love with the puppets. And I can't think of a whole lot worse to say. That is pretty darn bad. I love these puppets based on their interaction with their human caretaker and their expressiveness and the joy that they brought to the screen, both in their moments of cheerfulness and in their moments of killiness. And it just wasn't present with this one. They just felt very static. Even when they were expressing themselves to the Puppet Master, it was just very toned down, a little nod of the head from one of the characters while the other four were standing still. it was very, very disappointing. And that, if you're going to have a Puppetmaster movie, then you better have some freaking puppeteers in your budget. Either that or some stop motion creation. And it just felt like that is the portion where they got the laziest in this movie. So that brought it down a whole lot. This actually was a fairly technically adept movie, and it would have been getting a whole lot higher, except that was a very critical element, and that's why it only got 9 out of 25 points. So that gives us a total of 28 out of 100 points. There won't be a deep dive for this one because there really wasn't a whole lot to dive into, and it is the first of a trilogy. It did finish with a cliffhanger. So there's 2 more movies to really go through with the Axis trilogy, and I imagine this entire storyline. So perhaps I will have a deep dive at the end of the 3rd movie of the Axis trilogy, which will be the last step before we get into the Puppetmaster, The Littlest Reich remake, and finish things off. So until then, I will see you tomorrow for Axis of Puppetmaster 10, Axis Rising. I will see you then. Thank you very much for joining me. And next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. Personal journal entry, September the 20th. How can I be expected to endure these movies? How can I keep going on with this? I've watched 11 Puppetmaster movies now, and there's still 2 to go. I haven't heard a word from the home front or my darling Annabelle in days. Rations are waning, morale is low, and I hear they're canceling casual Fridays. Whoever reads this, pray for me. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I'm reviewing the 11th installment in the Puppetmaster franchise, Puppetmaster 10. This is what happens when you decry a movie and declare it non-canonical. It just messes the whole order up. Regardless, this is the 2nd movie in the Axis trilogy, Axis Rising, and my first impression after having watched it is that it addressed a lot of the issues that I had with the previous movie, Axis of Evil. It didn't necessarily fix all of them, but it did attempt and it did address, and I have to praise it for that. And to kind of get into each one of those, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot of this one, I gave an 8 out of 25, about the same as the last one. The storyline was, it continued where the last one left off, which I kind of anticipated. It was the 2nd of a planned trilogy within the franchise, so I figured that those 3 movies would be its own continuing storyline. So far, that seems to be holding true. The main characters from the previous one, having now foiled the weapons manufacturing blow-em-up scheme, are now being praised and lauded by the military, and they have a decision to make whether or not to reveal the nature of the truth of the puppets to the military, who are, they need their help. Meanwhile, the Axis powers are working on their own serum, elixir of life kind of thing for bringing dead soldiers back to life. It's something that we've seen, from Puppetmaster 3 before. And ultimately, this leads them down to a territory where the movie turns into puppet versus puppet, which is actually kind of interesting, and I thought it worked pretty well. The dialogue was still really bad. The plot structure still had a lot of missteps to it in terms of timing and motivational points, and ultimately it was good-ish, but definitely not great. So 8 out of 25 on the plot. The intent did get higher than the last one. I gave it a 15 out of 25. This is a lot more true to form for a Puppetmaster movie, and I did have a lot more fun with it. And that was something that I mentioned was missing from the last one, was a sense of fun. The puppets in the last one were way too static, and in this one, they addressed it. They didn't fix it. They are moving more. They are doing more pantomime communication with the humans. They're engaging more. It felt more like the puppets that I fell in love with, even if there still wasn't a whole lot of stop motion. It still wasn't terribly expressively animated, but it was better. I'll say that. It was absolutely better, and I have to give it some points for addressing those issues. And in doing so, it did make for a fun Puppetmaster movie. And again, this is not something that's trying to be scary. If it ever did, it has certainly gone out the window a long time ago. And so you have to kind of think what the intention of this is besides just making money. And what it definitely should be at all points is fun. And I got that sense out of this one again. So major kudos for them on addressing that. The acting also got a little bit higher, and it's not that it got a whole lot better. I gave it 8 out of 25. My big issue with the acting on the last one was the performance of the Dragon Lady. I said that kind of really drug it down a bit. Well, not to get too spoilery, I mean, it does happen pretty much in the beginning of the movie, like in the first 5-10 minutes or so. So I don't really consider it spoilers, but the Dragon Lady gets it. So the rest of the movie is cheesy, hammy acting all the way through with a wink and a smile. Not great acting at all, but certainly more fun without a whole lot dragging it down. So yeah, 8 out of 25. I feel pretty confident giving it that. And the technical, again, the puppetry was better. It was a little bit more animated. You didn't have, when you had a scene where a human was talking to a puppet and the other 4 or 5 or whatever were in the background, at the very least, they were kind of making some movements, even if they weren't, a lot of expressive or anything. They were at least moving at some point. They weren't just completely standing still. So the puppetry did get better. It still wasn't great, but I think that the camera work and the color palette and everything that had worked well in the previous movie did carry over into this one. And it didn't have the abysmal puppet wrangling dragging it down. So I gave it 12 out of 25 points. Overall, this is kind of more what I've come to expect and want out of a Puppetmaster movie. I would still prefer, more kills, more gore, but that's just me, and that's my sense of sadism in watching these movies, even if doing so is a exercise in masochism. So, total score of 40 out of 100 points. I am dearly looking forward to watching the next installment and finding out how this trilogy winds up wrapping up. And from there, it's on to the remake, and then it's done. The Puppetmaster series will be wrapped up. 2 more movies to go. I welcome you to join me, and next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at Puppetmaster 11, the 12th of the series, Puppetmaster Axis Termination, made in 2017. Now, before I get to that, you may notice I'm wearing an Alfred University shirt. The reason for that is a reminder that Saturday, October 27th from noon to 4, Rotted Reviews will be on location at Alfred University in the Powell Campus Center doing a 4-hour live stream. We're going to have reviews, we're going to have discussions, debates, games, giveaways, all sorts of fun prizes and so forth. So if you're a student of Alfred University or Alfred State or just happen to be in the area, come on by. Get on camera with me, have a debate, have a discussion. Otherwise, please tune in. I welcome you there. So, on to the movie. Now, this is the last of the original story arc, because as I understand it, I'm kind of going into this entire thing with purposeful ignorance, so everything that I see is a revelation to me. And as I understand it, the next movie, the last movie, The Littlest Reich, is a remake or a reboot. So, as far as the original story arc, I'm done. I only have one more movie to go, but this story arc, I'm done. And I have to say, it ended with a bang. I really, really enjoyed it. And this Axis trilogy itself has been a bit of a roller coaster ride. I'm going to have a deep dive discussion where I basically just kind of regroup before getting into the final movie and just kind of take a look at the journey I've been treading so far. So, Axis Termination, it followed the same timeline, the same path as the previous Axis movies. And you know what? Before I discuss the plot, let's open up the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. Now, the plot of this one, like I said, it picks up where the last one left off. And sort of. It pretty much, it bookends it right away and then kind of continues on with the same journey of the puppets with different human characters at that point. And it was a really weird transition, but overall I thought it worked pretty well. It had to do with not just the Allies and the Axis powers coming up with their own elixir of life and their own puppets and so forth, as in previous ones, but also it brought a psychic element to it, where the Allies and the Axis had their own psychic powers and telekinesis powers and so forth. And so it was kind of a big showdown of this multiple layered otherworldly stuff that, you know, is basically, you know, magic. And I had to be, you know, and I would be lying if I said that it worked really well. It really didn't. It wasn't a very well-constructed plot line. It wasn't a good movie. Did I enjoy it? Yes, and for reasons I'll get into. But was it a good movie? No. I mean, following the FMF rules there, you know, from is it a film? No. Is it a movie? No. It's a flick. And as far as a flick goes, it was pretty cheesy. The plot, I gave a 6 out of 25 for that. Now, the intent, I've said throughout, especially after the first movie, that the intent of all of these movies should be puppet kills and fun. And this had puppet kills and fun galore. It was fantastic in that regard. If you're going into the 11th Puppetmaster movie, you have a certain level of expectation. You know, you're not expecting an Academy Award winner. You're expecting puppet kills and fun. And this movie really, really delivered with that. It was bloody. It was gory. The puppets had a great time. You could tell everybody that made it had a great time. And I really appreciate that. Apparently, a lot of the background extras, the Nazis that were just kind of the brutes that didn't say anything, were actual fans of the franchise that were brought in to take part in this. And you kind of get that communal fun sense out of it. I think that they knew that they were going to be putting a bow on the franchise as it currently stood. And they sent it off with a bang, and I had to appreciate that. So 18 out of 25 for the intent. I was super pleased with this one. The acting, the last movie got an 8. This one gets a 7. It in no way improved. The dialogue was cheesy. It was delivered poorly. Everything about the acting was stilted and weird and amateurish, not to get too harsh on it, but even so. The reason it got a point lower than the last one is I specifically deducted a full point for the accents that were involved. You had German folks, you had a character who was Russian, and none of the accents worked. I think especially the Russian one. It sounded like this weird mix of British, Asian, with peppered in American, as with the dialogue forgot to have an accent every once in a while. It was pretty off and pretty terrible. So yeah, 7 out of 25 for the acting. The technical, I gave a 15 out of 25. The puppetry was a million times better than the first one. I said that the second one addressed a lot of the issues I had with the first one, and this took it a step further. It didn't just address them. I'd say at this point, it fixed them. The puppetry was on point. The stop motion was good. They had the puppets moving around, which were clearly just, people dressed up as the puppets in front of a green screen that were injected into the scene. But even so, it worked. I mean, I say clearly, that's only because, I kind of was watching it, and I really don't think that there was any other way to do it that smoothly. It's not like the green screen was apparent or that the effect didn't work. It did work, and I really liked it. Things that didn't work was some blood splatter. There was definitely some blood splatter, and this happened in the second movie too. I didn't really talk about it then, but I will now, since it did definitely carry over. Is a lot of the blood splatter, you can tell, was done in post. And that's something that is really tricky and really should never be done in post. Blood splatter especially should always be done in front of the camera. It's not something that you can add an effect and make it look real. It looked very, very distractingly off. The big mark against this one, the reason it didn't get any higher than 15 out of 25, is the color palette. It was terrible. Throughout the entire movie, I think that the only thing that they used as far as lighting were pink and green bluish gel. It was just, everything was really, really harshly lit with deep pink or red lighting on like one half of their face and bluish green on the other half. And it was very, very weird and distracting and almost nauseating in some parts. I have no idea what the skin tone complexion was of any character in the movie. So that should tell you something right there. I don't know why stylistically they chose to go that direction, but they did, and I'm marking them down for it. So 15 out of 25. It honestly should be higher than that, but 15 out of 25 for the technical, which gives us a total score of 46 out of 100 points. I really enjoyed this movie. I think that this is a return to form of the fun that was had before, and somehow in retro and curse and not even going to talk about legacy, it just kind of got lost in there. But I'm going to cover that more in deep dive as I kind of recount through the movies that we've done. So that should about do it for this one. Look for the deep dive. Look for me tomorrow with the actual last entry, The Littlest Reich. And we'll be done with this Puppetmaster adventure together. Other than that, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day. And today, we're done. It's over. The last movie has been watched and it's being reviewed right now. Puppetmaster, The Littlest Reich. Now, I had heard a few things about this movie, potentially that it was a remake, potentially that it was a reboot, potentially it was a continuation. There's kind of rumors abound. I purposefully didn't look anything up about this one. And if you haven't seen it yet, I'm not going to get into spoiler territory, but I will say that this is absolutely a reboot. It is not a remake. It is not a continuation. They have taken the essence of the Puppetmaster series, which is killer puppets. stripped out a lot of the other elements. They kept some names like Toulon, but the nature of the characters themselves are different. So, and the backstory and the history of Toulon and so forth is very different. So the best I can really say about this is I enjoyed it immensely. The thing that, if I was looking at it strictly from the point of view of a fan of the Puppetmaster series, therein I would find a lot of faults with it. But taking it on its own, for what it is, for what it's trying to be, I really enjoyed the heck out of it. If you are used to the Puppetmaster series and that's what you're looking for, you're probably going to be a bit disappointed, or at the very least disarmed. So let's get into why by getting into the categories. Each category worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. Now, the plot of this one, it follows the main character played by Thomas Lennon, who is a recently divorced comic book artist / comic book store worker whose brother seems to have been befallen by an accident. It's kind of inferred, and he's going through his stuff and he finds a Blade doll. Now, this is where things really start deviating from the Puppetmaster series. Is in this, the Toulon murders that happened 30 years prior are known about. The puppets are infamous. They are known in the world. They are the work of a madman that slaughtered people and got gunned down 30 years prior. So he has one of these puppets, whether it's a recreation or what, it really doesn't, it doesn't go into it at this point, but there is a convention for the 30th anniversary of the puppet killings, the murders of Toulon. And he figures that at this convention, he can sell this puppet at auction. So he goes with his new girlfriend and his comic book store owner, manager / friend to the convention, to the hotel where it's being held at, and that's where all hell breaks loose. It goes into the backstory, and this isn't really spoilery, but I am giving a fair bit of the story away here, and the reason for that is because if you are used to the Puppetmaster series, I feel like I'm not going to get into spoilers, I'm not going to get into revelations about the plot or anything like that, but I feel like the groundwork needs to be at least a little bit up front. In all of the Puppetmaster series leading up to this one, Toulon was maybe not the good guy. There was kind of a few in there that were, like, especially number 2, where he was definitely not. But this is the first movie where he was actually historically a Nazi. They established he was French-born, but that he, after being arrested several times, went to Germany and was embraced and embracing the Third Reich. And so that was definitely a big twist on the character. You had, especially from Puppetmaster 3, Toulon's Revenge, he's fighting the Nazis. He's on the run from them to actively being one. That's a pretty big shift. And that's another area where I say, if you are a fan of the Puppetmaster series as it currently stood, then this will be disarming for you. And potentially, a lot of people don't like being challenged. A lot of people don't like being disarmed. And there's not a whole lot wrong with that. But they will often take that and turn it into negative feelings and, F this movie. I really try to approach things from a much more objective standpoint. And the watching of the Puppetmaster series that I've done up to this point has more been for reference and for knowing what I'm talking about as I review this final movie, more than for me to lay a groundwork of opinion that will influence my review of this movie, if that makes any kind of sense whatsoever. As much as I am a fan of the Puppetmaster series, I am able to take a look at this movie, realize that it turned a lot of things that I loved on its head, and still enjoy it for what it's trying to do. So another big departure for this is the puppets themselves. Now, I had said that in previous reviews, I've maintained that one of my favorite things about the puppets is the fact that they have a soul, that they have a moral compass. And even though they act on the whims of their puppet master, whomever that might be in that particular movie, that they, they may not have reservations necessarily about killing if that's what they're ordered to do. But if the puppet master himself were to cross a moral line or disrespect them, then they have the free will and wherewithal to say no and even turn on them. And in this one, they are definitely more mindless, evil, doing what they're told with no real thought to it. So that was a different shift there as well. Now, this is what I mean by saying that it's a total reboot. It really did strip the series down to say, well, what is this movie supposed to be about? Well, puppets and killing people. And let's throw the name Toulon in there. So, I mean, really, that's the elements that carry over. They have, the puppets of, Tunler and Blade and so forth. But they're different aesthetically, and they're definitely different in mindset. So you kind of have to accept that when you watch this. You have to accept it and say, well, what is it trying to do? And so, you know what? I'm going to get into that. Sorry, I forgot I was into the categories. So the plot, I thought, was overall okay. It was the weakest part of this movie, which had many strong parts. So I gave it an 8 out of 25. And the intent, this is kind of where I was going with this, is, that when they stripped that down and they said, we want to make a gory blood fest with puppets and kills and interesting characters. And you know what? They succeeded by leaps and bounds. This I gave a 22 out of 25 for the intent, which is the highest scoring intent of any of the Puppetmaster series so far. Make no mistake, this movie is gory, and it is an absolute delight. It is a romp of obscenely over-the-top kills. Like, there has never been anything like this in the Puppetmaster series before. This is not just an assault on the senses for a Puppetmaster movie. This is an assault on the senses, period. This is gory. If you can't stand the sight of blood, if this is the kind of thing that makes you squeamish, if you prefer more spiritual, haunting kind of movies, this is not the one to watch at all. But if you take delight in watching bloodfest, gory, splatterfest, really creative kills, then you should absolutely watch this one. Even if you're a Puppetmaster fan, you know what? Take your preconceived notions and just shelve them for a little bit. Recognize what this movie was trying to do. I really think that you will enjoy this one, and I think it's a shame if people can't get that and put that aside for the sake of enjoying this one, because I think it deserves to be enjoyed. It really was a lot of fun. It's so much fun. The acting was something that really set this apart. Thomas Lennon did an amazing job, but the supporting cast also did a really, really great job too. I think everybody in this had a unique character. The dialogue was well written. Everything about it was really cohesive, and the character interactions with one another were a big departure from the series because they felt very natural. They felt very fluid. They had this kind of rapport with one another, and they were comfortable with one another, and the dialogue felt very real. So the acting, I gave a 17 out of 25. This is the best acting I have seen in a Puppetmaster movie. Nothing about it felt stilted or weak in any way. So massive kudos for that. And the technical, I gave a 20 out of 25. So I mentioned, obviously this is a gory movie. This really doesn't hold back, and it has some pretty shocking moments. This really elevated that line of good taste, but the methods in which they did it was clear that the puppets were well done. The blood and gore effects were well done. A lot of it was practical effects, and it showed. A lot of it was CG, and it didn't show. I mean, as in, it was well done and was very seamless and worked within the context of the movie. So overall, I was very impressed with the technical aspects of this movie, and there were a lot of effects going on. So 20 out of 25 for that. I was really super impressed by this movie. I am really glad I watched all the movies leading up to it. But this really stood on its own. And like I said, I really hope that fans of the Puppet Master franchise recognize what this was trying to do and still managed to set aside the elements of it that they love, like I did. You know, I loved the puppets having that moral compass. I loved the Blade character, you know, interacting with the humans and being kind of cool with them, and, you know, generally, you know, almost being the good guys in some situations, especially if they were going against Nazis and things like that. Recognize that, you know, the characters did take a pretty major shift, and just say, you know what? I came here to watch puppets kill people in really creative ways. And I think just stripped out to that one statement, this movie delivered more than any other Puppet Master movie has. And that may vilify me within the Puppet Master cult community. I'm sorry if it does. That's not what I intend to do. However, I stand by it. I really do believe it. After having watched it, and after having had one kill after another happen on screen, where it just kept getting more and more and more and more extreme, to the point where I was just giggling and laughing, and I was watching it with my friends and they couldn't believe what they were watching on the screen. And it was just beautiful in how obscene it was, and I loved every minute of it. You know, even when the kills weren't happening, just the interactions with Thomas Lennon and the other characters were really, really good. So, I do recommend this one. I really heartily recommend this one. If you've never seen a Puppet Master movie, please, you know, watch this one. You really don't need to have any backstory. It really did flip the script on its head, so you don't need the backstory. As much as I've seen now 12 movies leading up to this one, so that I can have a good frame of reference, I can safely say it's not necessary. But other than that, yeah, it gives us a final score of 67 out of 100. Highly recommend. Please watch, and please let me know what you think in the comments below. Other than that, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.